here. I have no news to break. As you know, I try and get around in the course of the season, and I figured I'd put myself in the neighborhood, come to a game, spent the day doing a variety of things with the organization, whether it was a town hall with most of the staff, meeting with senior executives, spent a lot of time, obviously, with Bob Nicholson and Ken Holland. And I took another tour of the Ice District, which seems to get bigger and better each time I come here. And it looks like things are all good. So since I'm not breaking any news, I assume somebody may have a question or two, and I'm happy to try to answer them.
Hey, Gary. Derek Van Diest, Post Media. Just wanted to ask you maybe just to get a comment on the outdoor game next year with the Oilers. Obviously, they had the game, and it kind of set off this outdoor phenomenon that's going on, and it's still very popular. Just I thought about coming back to Edmonton.
Actually, I was just at a season ticket thing with Kenny where we were asking each other questions, and that topic came up. It launched a whole series of spectacular events. I remember it being 20 below, and I think that was Fahrenheit actually at the time. And the imagination and the execution of the first game led us down a path where, you know, it's become, I think, unique in sports, and it has been a trademark of ours, and it just gets better and better every year, and we think coming back here next fall is going to be spectacular, and there'll be a lot of events planned around it, both downtown and out at the stadium.
Gary, Jim Matheson, Post Media. You mentioned the Ice District. The Oilers have only had one draft and one All-Star game. Yeah. They've been in the league for over 40 years. Are there any plans to get the Oilers either an All-Star game or a draft?
We actually have been in constant discussions. I think from the Oilers' perspective, from OEG's perspective, they want the Ice District finished. And at that point, they want us to bring the events, and we're happy to do that. We're coming. It's just a question of timing.
Thank you.
Gary, just wondering if there's any update on the investigation, 2018.
Yeah, actually, I asked my people that a couple of days ago. A couple of little things they've got to finish doing so that they can be comfortable that they can complete the report. But as I think I've said and Bill Daly has said repeatedly, we're in the home stretch, and I think we're getting much, much closer to the end in terms of those who are conducting the investigation having all the information that they want to have.
And idea on a timeline potentially and what it looks like when it's done?
That would require me to speculate and prejudge, neither of which I'm prepared to do. When I get the report, I haven't been getting substantive updates. I just get reports as to how they're doing. When I get the full report, then we'll make a judgment as to what, if anything, needs to be done.
This year, more so than in years past, we've seen teams scratching players for trade-related reasons, and they're putting out these releases about it. A couple players are pretty deep into this already. Is this on your radar at all? Any concerns here?
Well, actually, it is on my radar, and it's exactly what you said. We've seen this to an extent we haven't seen this before. It's something that I want to discuss at the general managers meeting, which we're going to have in March, and it's something we have to keep an eye on. I mean, listen, we don't have issues of load management. Our players are generally playing when they need to be, even if they're injured in some cases. But occasionally a player needs to be away, and a team chooses to let him, whether or not it's the birth of a child, the death of a parent. These things happen in the course of a season. We haven't seen it to this extent, as you said, and it's something that we need to focus on as to whether or not, A, it's a unique phenomenon for whatever reason this year, and whether or not it's a problem. But it's something we're keeping. It is on my radar. That was a long-winded answer to your question. It is on our radar.
And is that something in conjunction with the PA? I imagine you might have a stake in it as well in some way.
Well, first we've got to decide whether or not it's a problem. And at that point, we'll discuss it with the PA.
Lastly, for me, any update on the Ottawa Senators sale coming in?
The due diligence process from 15 or more people or groups are in the process of doing due diligence, and my guess is they'll start requesting the people running the process, the Galiotto Sports Partners, which is the investment banking firm running the process. I think into early March, they'll be starting to look for preliminary bids. So it's on track.
Gary Mark Spector, any update on the Bally company of networks, and is there a timeline that you need to get to the end of the season here where it doesn't affect the NHL as much?
Well, we from all of those running regional sports networks, we're assured that we'll get through the regular season, and then the playoffs in the U.S. are all national anyway, and Bally's Diamond Sports is trying to reorganize, and we're working with them cooperatively to keep it going. You know, there's obviously a fundamental change in the winds in terms of how sports are being distributed locally. It's something that we're keeping our eye on. We're making sure we have options to make sure our games are out there for our fans, and we're going to have to evolve with the times, and we're working on the various strategies that will be available to us in the event the change has to come. But we think in the short term things will be fine.
Back to the All-Star game and the draft. We've heard you say this for some time, that they want the ice district to be ready. A draft works well in a Canadian city because people are all consuming hockey. Is there a concern about trying to put an All-Star game in a northern city when it comes to drawing players? Florida was a huge success. Guys like bringing their families there in February or January. No. Can you ask the PA to bring their players and family up here in January?
What's wrong with coming up here in January? This is a place where hockey matters. Our players love to be in places where hockey matters, and I don't see it being an issue at all in terms of bringing an All-Star game here. Question seemed a little paranoid on your part.
Oh, did you see Brad Marchand's opinion on that?
Well, you know what? Everybody has an opinion, and opinions are frequently thrown out there as trial balloons, but in the final analysis, I don't think we would have any trouble hosting a successful All-Star game here or in any city where we have a team.
Gary, Bob Stauffer, Oilers Radio. Given the battle you had during the days of the Canadian Assistance Program going back in the early 2000s, could you have envisioned, coming in here and the understated role you had in helping get this building built? You kind of look, is there a little...
Oh, we knew it all along.
Is there a little bit of a sense of pride? The Oilers, I think, assume have been a revenue contributor in several of the years over the past. I don't know. You know where I'm going with it.
There are lots of people who deserve credit for the Oilers being here in this magnificent building in the Ice District. The last event I was at, I happened to see Cal Nichols there and acknowledged him, and that group stepped up at the right time to do the right things to make sure that NHL hockey would be alive and well in Edmonton. Daryl Cates' ownership has been extraordinary in terms of what he has invested of himself, and I don't just mean financially, the vision and the execution to create all of this. It's the incredible support that this team gets from the community. Was I involved? Sure, but Mayor Mandel had a vision and a spirit of cooperation to make sure that there was a vision for Edmonton, not just for today, but in decades going forward. This is ultimately a collaborative effort where things are brought together. Frankly, this is a place where I think the NHL should be, and we and everybody involved did whatever was necessary to make sure that this, as you're reporting it, my hand pointing around to everything around us, was a great achievement for a wonderful city that loves hockey.
Gary, what's the genesis of the interest from people in Australia for hockey games in the National Hockey League. Did this just start, or has this been cooking for several?
No, we get expressions from interest all around the world that people are interested in our game. I mean, our games are distributed in media in something like 150 countries around the world. Australia is a country that has a great history of being rabid sports fans, and we've been approached by people who think it would be a really good idea for us to share our game with them. Whether or not that ultimately is a reality depends on a whole host of logistical and other moving parts. But, you know, whether or not it's playing games as we did this year in Finland or in past years in Sweden or this year again in Prague, you know, we are always flattered by the expressions of interest, and to the extent we can address them, we try to. It's good for the game in terms of development of players outside of North America as well, and it's also good for business, the business of the game. And by the way, the players like doing these trips. They're fun because we try and do them right and make it a good experience. We know it's work, okay, but we try and change it up a little bit to make it interesting and intriguing.
It is a long way to go, though.
Yeah, well, by the way, we agree. It is a long way to go. And, you know, if ultimately it's something that players want to do, we can accommodate it. If it's not something the players don't have an interest in, then we don't do it.
Gary, I just want to talk about the playoff format. I know there's no real appetite to expand the 16 teams, but just wondering the way it's set up now, has there been talk about changing the format at all, or do you like where it is?
No, actually, you know, if you think about the stretch run to the playoffs, it's incredible. I think if you look at the last 2 weeks, on any given day, I think the Oilers could have had 4 different opponents in the first round if the season ended on that given day. When you look at our first round and how intense it is, when you look at the number of 6- and 7-game series that we get throughout the playoffs, I don't think there's anything comparable to our playoffs. There's always a lot of chatter about change this, change that, but you know, that's in search of a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. What we have is working extraordinarily well based on attendance, based on competitiveness, based on TV ratings. It's working very well. It creates for an exciting regular season where the games are meaningful throughout. And you know, if you look at the competitiveness of our game, yes, we're averaging 6.3 goals a game, which is a pretty high watermark for us. When you look at come from behind victories, we're somewhere in the 40% range, which is, it's not an all-time high, but it's close to it. When you look at multi-goal comebacks or third period multi-goal comebacks, we're doing extraordinary things that make the game compelling, entertaining, and exciting on a nightly basis.
So I think the spirit, when this, if I recall, when you developed this, the GMs developed this playoff structure, was to try to get more local or more rivalry playoff series. Is that correct? This is a local question, but here in Edmonton, the Flames and Oilers played their last game against each other on December 7th. I believe the same thing happened with the Rangers.
You're correct.
Is that any concern for regular season?
You know how complex it is to do the schedule. We're doing 1,312 regular season games with a lot of travel in 32 different buildings where there are other events and dates aren't always available. And in an ideal, and we have national broadcast arrangements in 2 countries and 3 or 4 national broadcasters. I include TVA is the 4th. So it's a hard job. Steve Hatzapetros does a great job. It's not perfect, and as it relates to bunching of games, particularly among rivals, we need to focus on spreading it out more, and that's something we're going to try and do. Anybody else? Going. Gone. Should be a fun game tonight. Enjoy it, and thanks for spending some time with me.